Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers when I heard Sophie's voice floating through the garage window, crystal clear on speakerphone. She was talking to someone who definitely wasn't me, and her tone carried a breathless quality I hadn't heard directed my way in about 3 years. "Last night was incredible, Nate. I can't stop thinking about what you did to me in that hotel room." Well, if this was an accidental call, it was one heck of a revealing mistake. I'm Jake Morrison, 44 years old, former Army communications specialist turned IT consultant. I fix computers for small businesses and patch up my 15-year-old Toyota in my spare time. My wife Sophie manages marketing campaigns for Pinnacle Creative, a glass and steel monument to corporate ambition downtown. She makes twice what I do and never lets me forget it. Standing there with motor oil under my fingernails, listening to my wife of 18 years describe intimate details with her boss, I felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak, that would come later. This was pure calculating rage wrapped in dark amusement. "The way you grabbed my hair when I was on my knees," Sophie continued, apparently unaware her phone had betrayed her. "God, I've never felt so alive." I grabbed my own phone and started recording. If Sophie wanted to play dirty games, she'd learn that this particular underdog had a few tricks of his own. The conversation lasted another 5 minutes. 5 minutes of my wife describing acts of passion she'd never shown me, planning future encounters, and laughing about how clueless Jake was becoming. When she finally hung up, I stood in the sudden silence of my garage, surrounded by the tools and projects that had become my refuge from a marriage gone cold. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, chose that moment to peer over our shared fence. "Everything all right over there, Jake? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just working on the car, Mrs. Patterson. You know how it is." She nodded sympathetically. Mrs. Patterson had been divorced twice and had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense marital discord. "Well, if you need anything, you just holler." I needed quite a few things, actually. A new wife, for starters. Maybe a time machine to go back and marry someone who wasn't a social climbing snake. But what I said was, "Thanks, I appreciate that." Mando. That evening, Sophie breezed through the front door at 7:30. Her usual time when she wasn't working late with Nate. She looked radiant, practically glowing with satisfaction. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite the long day. She'd always been beautiful. That's what had caught my attention when we met at a college party 20 years ago. Back then, her ambition had seemed charming rather than consuming. "How was your day?" she asked, pecking my cheek with lips that had been doing unspeakable things to her boss just 24 hours earlier. "Oh, fixed some computers, listened to some interesting conversations." The usual. She didn't catch the edge in my voice. Sophie had become remarkably skilled at not hearing things she didn't want to hear. "I'm exhausted," she said, kicking off her designer heels. "Nate had us working on the Henderson account all afternoon. That man is such a perfectionist." "I'll bet he is," I thought. "Sounds demanding." "You have no idea." She stretched, and I noticed a small bruise on her collarbone, partially hidden by her silk blouse. "I think I'll take a bath and go to bed early. Don't wait up. Don't wait up." The phrase that had become Sophie's standard dismissal over the past year. I used to think she was just tired from work stress. Now I understood she was tired from screwing her boss. After she disappeared upstairs, I opened my laptop and began what I like to call digital reconnaissance. Sophie had always been careless with passwords, using variations of our daughter's name and birthday. Tess 1805. Our 18-year-old, who was thankfully away at college and wouldn't have to witness whatever was about to unfold. Sophie's email revealed a treasure trove of evidence. Hotel reservations, restaurant bookings for two, and a particularly illuminating exchange with her best friend Jenna about keeping Jake in the dark until after the promotion. Apparently my humiliation was part of some larger plan. The most damning evidence came from her text messages. Months of explicit conversations with Nate, including photos I definitely didn't want to see, but saved anyway. They'd been planning something called Operation Cleanup for weeks, which seemed to involve publicly embarrassing me at the upcoming company party. I leaned back in my desk chair, processing this information. Sophie wasn't just cheating, she was actively plotting to destroy what remained of my dignity. The woman I'd supported through business school, who'd cried in my arms when her father passed away, who'd once promised to love me through better or worse, was treating me like an obstacle to be removed. My phone buzzed with a text from Ray Kowalski, my old army buddy who now ran a boxing gym on the east side of town. "Beer tonight? You sound like you need it." I hadn't realized I sounded like anything, but Ray had always been perceptive. We'd served together in Afghanistan, and he'd saved my skin more than once when insurgents tried to take out our communications equipment. If anyone would understand the tactical approach to handling betrayal, it would be Ray. "On my way," I texted back. The Southside boxing gym occupied a converted warehouse that smelled like sweat, leather, and determination. Ray had transformed it into a sanctuary for guys like us, men who needed somewhere to work out their frustrations without breaking anything important. The sound of gloves hitting heavy bags provided a steady rhythm as I found Ray in his office, reviewing membership applications. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he said, glancing up from his paperwork. "More like someone stole my wife." Ray set down his pen and gave me his full attention. In the Army, that expression had usually preceded some very practical advice about dealing with enemies. "Want to talk about it?" I told him everything. The phone call, the emails, the photos, the conspiracy with Jenna. Ray listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disgust. "So what's your plan?" he asked when I finished. "I don't have one yet. I keep thinking I should confront her, but something tells me that's exactly what she's expecting. Smart instinct. If she's planning some kind of public humiliation, confronting her privately just gives her time to adjust her strategy." Ray leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his considerable bulk. "You want my advice? Always. Don't get mad. Get even, but do it smart, and do it completely. Half measures just make enemies." That night, I lay in bed next to Sophie, listening to her breathe. She slept peacefully, probably dreaming about her next promotion or her next encounter with Nate. I stared at the ceiling, formulating what Ray would call mission parameters. Sophie wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd learned that underestimating the quiet guy with the technical background was a serious tactical error. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Company party this Friday. You're coming, right? It'll be fun. Sophie." I smiled in the darkness. Oh, I'd be there. But my definition of fun was about to become very different from hers. The next morning, Sophie was unusually cheerful at breakfast, humming while she made her protein smoothie and checking her phone every few seconds. Each buzz brought a little smile to her lips. "You seem happy today," I observed, sipping coffee that tasted like betrayal. "Just excited about Friday's party. The whole company will be there, including some potential new clients. It's a big opportunity for me." She paused, giving me a look I couldn't quite read. "For us, really. My success benefits both of us." Right. Her success with Nate was definitely going to benefit me in ways she couldn't imagine. "I'm looking forward to meeting your colleagues," I said truthfully, "especially your boss." "What's his name again? Nate?" "Nathan Hendricks. He's brilliant, really. Harvard MBA, worked at 3 Fortune 500 companies before joining Pinnacle. You'll like him." I already liked him quite a bit. He was going to be instrumental in my wife's downfall. After Sophie left for work, I drove downtown to conduct some field reconnaissance. Pinnacle Creative occupied the top 3 floors of the Morrison building. No relation to me, unfortunately. The irony wasn't lost on me, that my wife worked in a building that shared my last name while planning to publicly humiliate me. The lobby was all marble and glass, designed to intimidate visitors, with displays of corporate success. A directory listed Sophie's department on the 22nd floor. I took note of the security cameras, the keycard access points, and the general layout. Old habits from the Army. Always know your battlefield. I grabbed lunch at a deli across the street and observed the building's rhythm. Employees came and went in predictable patterns. Around noon, I spotted Sophie emerging with a tall man in an expensive suit. Nathan Hendricks, presumably. He was handsome in that polished, corporate way that women seem to find irresistible. They walked close together, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back in a gesture that looked casual but wasn't. They disappeared into an upscale restaurant 2 blocks away. I followed at a distance, watching through the window as they shared an intimate lunch. Nate fed Sophie a bite of his dessert, and she laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever experienced. The same woman who criticized me for chewing too loudly was practically giggling at this guy's every word. My phone rang. "Ray, how's the intelligence gathering going?" "Educational. Very educational." "Good. Listen, I did some research on your wife's company. Pinnacle Creative has been struggling lately. Lost 2 major accounts last quarter. Word is they're looking to make some personnel changes." "Interesting. Where'd you hear that?" "I know people who know people. Point is, your wife might be more desperate than you think." "Desperate people make stupid mistakes." Ray was right. Sophie's recent behavior made more sense if she was fighting for her professional life. The affair with Nate wasn't just about passion, it was about survival. She was securing her position the oldest way in the corporate handbook. That afternoon, I paid a visit to Jenna Walsh, Sophie's best friend and apparent co-conspirator. Jenna lived in a trendy downtown condo that cost more than I made in 2 years. She worked as a freelance marketing consultant, which seemed to involve a lot of expensive lunches and very little actual work. I rang her doorbell at 3 o'clock, knowing Sophie would be safely back at the office. "Jake, what a surprise!" Jenna's smile seemed forced, and she didn't invite me in. "Sophie's not here." "Actually, I came to see you. I wanted to ask about Friday's party. Sophie mentioned you helped plan it." Something flickered in Jenna's eyes. "Oh, just a little. You know how these corporate things are. Boring speeches, mediocre food, awkward small talk. Sophie seems excited about it. She said it might be a big night for her career." "Well, you know Sophie, always ambitious." Jenna glanced at her watch. "I'd love to chat more, but I have a conference call in a few minutes." "Of course, see you Friday." As I walked away, I noticed Jenna watching me from her window. Whatever they had planned for Friday night, she was nervous about it. Good. Nervous people made even more mistakes than desperate ones. That evening, Sophie worked late again, or claimed to. I used the time to explore her laptop more thoroughly. Hidden in a folder labeled Tax Documents 2019 inches, Sophie's idea of clever, I found the smoking gun, a detailed email thread between Sophie, Jenna, and someone called HR_Douglas about the Jake situation. The plan was worse than I'd imagined. They intended to publicly announce Sophie's promotion at Friday's party, followed by some kind of surprise that would leave me humiliated in front of her entire company. The emails were vague about specifics, but the intent was clear. They wanted to destroy me socially and professionally. One message from Jenna particularly caught my attention. "Make sure Jake wears something nice. It'll make the contrast more dramatic." The contrast. They were setting me up to look like a fool next to Sophie's success, the devoted, simple husband who couldn't keep up with his ambitious wife. I printed everything and stored the hard copies in my toolbox in the garage. Sophie never ventured into my workspace. She considered it beneath her notice. When she finally came home at 10:30, Sophie was practically vibrating with excitement. "Sorry I'm so late. Nate wanted to go over the presentation for Friday one more time. We want everything to be perfect." "I'm sure it will be." She studied my face, perhaps sensing something different in my tone. "You're not upset about me working late, are you? I know it's been happening a lot lately." "Not at all. I understand how important your career is to you." "Good." She seemed relieved. "Because after Friday, things are going to change around here. Big changes. I'm counting on it." That night, I lay awake planning my counterstrike. Sophie and her conspirators had made one crucial error. They'd underestimated their target. They saw a quiet IT guy who fixed computers and tinkered with cars. They didn't see the former Army communications specialist who'd spent 2 tours outsmarting insurgents and protecting vital information networks. They wanted to play psychological warfare? Fine. But they were about to learn that amateurs shouldn't challenge professionals. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Looking forward to meeting you Friday, Nate." I smiled and typed back, "Likewise, it's going to be unforgettable." 20 minutes later, Sophie's phone chimed with a message. She read it and frowned. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Just work stuff. Nate's being paranoid about security for Friday's event." "Security?" "Oh, making sure no unauthorized people get in. No disruptions to the presentations." Corporate events can be targets for protesters or disgruntled former employees. How ironic. They were worried about external threats, while the real danger was sleeping right next to Sophie every night. Well, I'm sure everything will go smoothly, I said. Yes, Sophie agreed, but she sounded less certain than before. I'm sure it will. Thursday morning brought an unexpected development. Sophie announced she'd be spending the night at Jenna's place to prepare for the party and avoid any last-minute stress. Girls' night before the big day, she explained, kissing my forehead like I was a child being left with a babysitter. Don't wait up. Perfect. This gave me 24 hours of uninterrupted access to prepare my own surprise. After Sophie left, I drove to Ray's gym.
Since when do you carry men's cologne to the gym?
It's my trainer's. He left it.
Your trainer keeps his cologne.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
I found him training a teenage boxer who reminded me of myself at that age. All determination and hidden anger. Take 5, Marcus, Ray told the kid. Work on your footwork. We retreated to his office, where Ray produced 2 cups of coffee that could strip paint. Tomorrow's the big day? Tomorrow's the day everything changes. I pulled out my phone and showed him some of the evidence I'd gathered. They're planning something called Operation Cleanup. From what I can piece together, they want to publicly humiliate me at this party. Ray studied the emails, his expression growing darker. These people are playing with fire. They have no idea who they're messing with. That's their mistake. So what's your plan? I outlined my strategy. Ray listened, occasionally nodding approval or suggesting tactical improvements. By the time we finished, we had something that would have made our old commanding officer proud. A comprehensive operation designed to turn the enemy's strength against them. You sure you want to go this far? Ray asked. Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. They crossed that line when they decided to destroy me for their entertainment. Fair enough. What do you need from me? Just some equipment and maybe a ride to the party. I have a feeling I won't be in any condition to drive afterward. Ray grinned. This is going to be epic. That afternoon, I made several strategic purchases. A small digital recorder, a portable speaker system, and some other items that would prove useful. I also stopped by a men's clothing store and bought the nicest suit I'd ever owned. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, expensive enough to make Sophie proud. If I was going to war, I'd dress for victory. The evening passed slowly. I ordered Chinese takeout and spent the time reviewing my intelligence and refining my plan. Every detail had to be perfect. Sophie and her conspirators would get one chance to destroy me. I'd make sure it was also their last. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. Sophie? Hi, honey. Just checking in. Having a great time with Jenna. We're doing face masks and drinking wine like we're 20 again. In the background, I could hear male laughter and what sounded like a champagne cork popping. Sounds fun. Just you and Jenna. Well, a few other friends stopped by. You know how it is. Girls' night tends to expand. Of course. Have fun. I'll see you tomorrow. Jake, I love you. You know that, right? The words hit me like a physical blow. Even now, even knowing what she was planning, part of me wanted to believe her. I know, I said. See you tomorrow. After she hung up, I sat in our living room, soon to be just my living room, and thought about 18 years of marriage. The good times had been genuinely good. Sophie laughing at my jokes, supporting me through my transition from military to civilian life, celebrating when I landed my first IT contract. We'd been partners once, facing the world together, but people change. Sophie had changed into someone who saw me as an obstacle to her ambitions, rather than a companion in life. And tomorrow, she'd learn that obstacles sometimes fight back. Nhan, I went to bed early and slept better than I had in months. Tomorrow would bring either vindication or complete disaster, but at least the uncertainty would end. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. Sophie returned home around 9, looking slightly hungover but excited. Big day, she announced, heading straight for the shower. The biggest, I agreed. She spent 2 hours getting ready, transforming herself into the polished executive she'd become. The final result was stunning. She looked like success personified. For a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her. How do I look? She asked, spinning to show off her outfit. Like you're ready to conquer the world. That's the plan. She checked her watch. I need to get to the office early for final preparations. The party starts at 7, but don't come until 7:30. I want to make sure everything's perfect before you arrive. 7:30 it is. She kissed me goodbye, and I tasted her lipstick, the same shade I'd noticed on Nate's collar in one of the photos she'd sent him. After she left, I began my own preparations. The new suit fit perfectly, transforming me from suburban IT guy into someone who belonged in corporate boardrooms. I styled my hair, trimmed my beard, and practiced my smile in the mirror. If Sophie wanted contrast, she'd get it, just not the kind she was expecting. At 6 o'clock, Ray arrived in his pickup truck. He took one look at me and whistled. "Damn, Morrison, you clean up nice. Thanks. You have the equipment?" He patted a duffel bag in the back seat. "Everything you requested, plus a few extras I thought might come in handy." We drove downtown in comfortable silence. The Morrison building was lit up like a beacon, with valet parking and red carpet treatment for the party guests. Through the lobby windows, I could see people in expensive clothes mingling with champagne glasses. "You ready for this?" Ray asked as we parked across the street. I checked my watch, 7:25. In 5 minutes, I'd walk into that building and either reclaim my dignity or lose everything trying. "I've been ready for this my whole life," I said. "I just didn't know it until now." Ray handed me the duffel bag. "Give them hell, brother." I walked across the street, through the lobby, and into the elevator that would carry me to the 22nd floor. As the numbers climbed, I felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened next, I'd face it on my own terms. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped into my future. The party was in full swing when I arrived. Pinnacle Creative had transformed their office space into something resembling a high-end nightclub, complete with mood lighting, a DJ, and enough alcohol to float a small yacht. The guest list included clients, employees, and what appeared to be half the city's business elite. I spotted Sophie immediately. She stood near a makeshift stage at the far end of the room, radiant in a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Nate was beside her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. They looked like the perfect power couple, successful, attractive, and completely comfortable with their deception. Jenna noticed me first. Her face went pale when she saw me in my expensive suit, looking nothing like the shabby husband they'd expected. She whispered something to Sophie, who turned and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Jake, you made it!" Sophie approached with Nate in tow. "You look different." I felt like dressing up for the occasion. "You said it was going to be a big night." "It certainly is." Nate extended his hand with practiced corporate charm. "Nathan Hendricks, I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand, noting his firm grip and confident smile. He was exactly the kind of man Sophie had always been attracted to. Polished, ambitious, and completely convinced of his own superiority. "All good things, I hope." "Of course. Sophie talks about you constantly." "I'll bet she does," I thought. "Probably not in the way you're implying, though." "Well, I'll let you two mingle," Sophie said, already scanning the room for more important people to schmooze. "The presentation starts in about an hour." "Presentation?" "Just some company announcements, nothing too exciting." Her smile was getting more strained by the minute. "Why don't you grab a drink and enjoy yourself?" I spent the next hour circulating through the crowd, introducing myself as Sophie's husband and watching people's reactions. Most were politely indifferent, but a few seemed surprised that Sophie was married at all. One particularly chatty marketing assistant named Carol let slip that everyone thought Sophie was single, based on her behavior at office events. Interesting. At 8:30, Nate took the stage and called for attention. The crowd gathered around, champagne glasses in hand, ready for whatever corporate theater was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. As you know, Pinnacle Creative has faced some challenges this year, but we've also had some remarkable successes. Tonight, I want to recognize one of our rising stars." He gestured towards Sophie, who stepped forward with a practiced smile. Sophie Morrison has been instrumental in securing 3 major accounts this quarter, bringing in over $2 million in new revenue. Her dedication, creativity, and willingness to go above and beyond have been truly exceptional. The crowd applauded politely. Sophie beamed like she'd just won an Academy Award, which is why I'm pleased to announce Sophie's promotion to Senior Vice President of Client Relations, effective immediately. More applause. Sophie looked genuinely surprised, though I suspected she'd known about the promotion for weeks. This was all theater, building toward whatever humiliation they had planned for me. "Sophie, would you like to say a few words?" She took the microphone with trembling hands. Thank you, Nathan. This opportunity means everything to me. I've worked so hard to get here, sometimes at the expense of other things in my life. She glanced at me, and I saw something in her eyes that might have been guilt, or maybe it was just the lighting. I want to thank my team, my colleagues, and especially my mentor Nathan for believing in me. And I want to thank my husband Jake for his patience during this challenging time. The crowd turned to look at me, and I raised my glass in acknowledgement. Several people smiled sympathetically, as if they understood what it was like to be married to someone so much more successful. Now, Sophie continued, I have a little surprise for everyone, something that represents new beginnings and fresh starts. Here it comes, I thought. Whatever humiliation they'd planned was about to unfold. Sophie nodded to someone in the back of the room, and suddenly a large screen descended from the ceiling. The lights dimmed, and I heard the familiar sound of a video starting to play. But instead of whatever embarrassing footage they'd prepared of me, the screen filled with an image I recognized immediately. Sophie and Nate in a hotel room, engaged in activities that definitely weren't covered in the employee handbook. The crowd gasped. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Sophie's face went from triumph to horror in about 2 seconds. What is this? She whispered into the microphone, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. The video continued, showing Sophie and Nate in various compromising positions, along with audio of their most intimate conversations. The sound quality was excellent. I'd spent considerable time enhancing it. Turn it off, Nate shouted, but whoever was controlling the presentation seemed to have vanished. The video shifted to a slideshow of text messages between Sophie and Nate, including detailed discussions of their affair and their plan to publicly humiliate me at this very party. The messages appeared on screen long enough for everyone to read them clearly. Operation Cleanup, one message read. Make Jake look like a pathetic loser in front of everyone, then announce the divorce. He'll be too embarrassed to fight back. The crowd was murmuring now, a mix of shock and fascination. I noticed several people discreetly taking photos with their phones. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media. The presentation concluded with a recording of Sophie's phone conversation from my garage, the one where she'd described her intimate encounters with Nate in explicit detail. Her voice filled the room, breathless with passion, as she recounted acts she'd never performed with her husband. When it finally ended, the room was dead silent. Sophie stood frozen on the stage, still holding the microphone, her face pale as paper. Nate was frantically pressing buttons on a remote control that apparently no longer worked. I stepped forward and began to clap slowly. The sound echoed through the silent room. Wonderful presentation, honey, very illuminating. All eyes turned to me as I walked toward the stage. Sophie's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, taking the microphone from my wife's limp fingers, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. As you can see, my wife has been working very hard lately. Very, very hard. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Sophie, you mentioned new beginnings and fresh starts. I couldn't agree more. In fact, I have a little surprise of my own. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Divorce papers, filed this afternoon. I think you'll find the terms quite reasonable, considering the circumstances. Sophie finally found her voice. Jake, please, we can talk about this privately. Privately? Like you and Nate talked privately about humiliating me. Like you and Jenna talked privately about making me look like a pathetic loser? I gestured to the crowd. No, I think this is the perfect venue. After all, you wanted everyone to see what a failure your husband was. Mission accomplished. I turned to address the crowd directly. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jake Morrison, Sophie's soon-to-be ex-husband. I want you all to know that I harbor no ill will toward anyone here. You're just doing your jobs, trying to make a living in a challenging economy. But some people in this room decided to make their success contingent on destroying someone else. That's where I draw the line. I handed the microphone back to Sophie, who was now crying mascara-stained tears. Congratulations on your promotion, honey. I hope it was worth it. As I walked toward the exit, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. I could hear whispered conversations starting up behind me, but I didn't look back. In the elevator, I finally allowed myself to smile. The plan had worked perfectly. Sophie and Nate were finished, both professionally and personally. Their affair was now public knowledge, which would make their working relationship impossible. Sophie's promotion would likely be rescinded once the company's board learned about her behavior. And I'd managed to destroy them both without breaking a single law. Ray was waiting in the lobby, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. How'd it go? See for yourself. Through the lobby windows, we could see people streaming out of the building, most of them talking animatedly on their phones. The party was clearly over. Damn, Morrison. Remind me never to get on your bad side. We walked out into the cool night air. I felt lighter than I had in years, like a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Please come back. We need to talk. I deleted it without responding. Another text. This one from Jenna. You've ruined everything. I hope you're happy. I was, actually, happier than I'd been in a long time. As Ray drove me home, I thought about what came next. I'd need to find a new place to live, rebuild my social circle, maybe even consider dating again eventually. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to control. You know what the best part is? I told Ray as we pulled into my driveway. What's that? They spent months planning my humiliation, and in